Automobilista 2 has released their long-awaited Le Mans DLC. It comes separated in two parts. The first, the Le Mans DLC, both has the Le Mans circuit and the Bugatti circuit. Then the Endurance Pack will come with the cars, the LMDH class and the GT3 Evo class. The update comes with a laundry list of improvements, and the DLC themselves should be around $10 each and are currently free for a few days if you want to try them out. If you want to get the Automobilista 2 Le Mans experience, you do need to get both pieces of DLC, or at least you can partially get the Automobilista 2 Le Mans experience if you just get the track. The track will be Le Mans, of course, and the Bugatti. I think Bugatti circuit, which we'll have a little bit look later, needs to be in more sims because it's such a good track. And of course, we'll have the LMDHs and the GT3s for the Endurance Pack. As for this track itself, for Le Mans, it's laser scanned. It seems to be very accurate, or quite accurate, pretty good. The only thing I really can criticize about this track is the asphalt. It feels a little bit boring, needs a little more detail here and there. But the roadside objects, and this has been one of the big things about Reza, and also about SMS when they built tracks for Project Cars 2, is that the roadside objects, or at least the way that these tracks feel lived in, it's actually pretty good with reasonable amount of viewers on the sides. The details like this Rolex thing and where the publicity tends to be, it tends to be quite on the spot. So it's, for me, it's a really good developed track with, once again, the tarmac could be a little bit more interesting in terms of detail, but that's really about it. Everything else is okay. Now, the second part of all of this Le Mans experience are, of course, the cars. With the pack, you'll get the LMDHs and the GT3 Evos, or the Gen 2s. In my opinion, you shouldn't buy this Endurance Pack for the GT3 cars, because it has been my opinion since essentially Automobilista 2 had GT3 cars, that the GT3s are one of the most uninspiring, or the GT3s in Automobilista 2, they're one of the most uninspiring pieces of content in all of sim racing. First of all, because there are much better GT3 cars out there in Assetto Corsa competizione, obviously, and iRacing, I think they do it much better there. And secondly, because Reza knows how to do much better cars inside of Automobilista 2, including the stock cars, for example. They're excellent cars to drive. They have much better pieces of content inside. So if you want to buy this Endurance Pack, it should be because of the LMDHs. Now, the LMDHs are quite interesting to drive. I'm not a big prototype guy. I don't know how to drive cars with more aero than a GT3, and even so, the GT3 cars that I drive, they're not driven very well. But I've been enjoying this, and I've been enjoying learning how to deploy the battery. Not sure if I'm doing it correctly. I think my best lap around here was a 328, and we should be able to beat the 330s. I go out of the corner, I deploy it, and then when I go in a straight line, I make the deployment lower or off, and then if we need to build more battery, and then the braking area, it tends to be a little bit longer just for the case of recovering some battery. So we have it a little more on the straights. Could be wrong, could be right. You let me know in the comments if it's fine or not. As for the three cars, they drive quite differently. The Porsche tends to be a little more on the squirrely side. The BMW I found is more balanced, and the Cadillac has a bit of both worlds. It moves quite well. It's one car that I've been enjoying driving. I've been driving this for like 2-3 hours, just this car alone, since this game was released. I find very much enjoyment driving this car, which is, a good thing. In terms of how the cars look, they'll look pretty great. In terms of Cadillac, the model is pretty good. All the other models are pretty good, though, of course, in my opinion, and it's really weird to say this, I think the Forza model looks better than this model, and it's something very strange to say because Forza doesn't have the best models, but once they got a model right, they got a model right. I guess in the Cadillac they do it pretty good. But still, this model looks pretty good. The wheel looks pretty nice. All the lights, all of that. It looks as good as the track, which is pretty good. In terms of the handling, though, there are a few things that are extremely Automobilista 2-like, and we'll see it over there at the Porsche curves. Okay, recovering some battery. Going in. Is that these cars, also in Automobilista 2, a lot of cars, they drive like that, is that they are extremely sensitive on the rear, and they corner in phases during the same corner with the same throttle application, which is kind of weird. We'll see it over here. So we go in, and now the car seems to be cornering in, stops cornering, goes into corner, stops cornering, goes into corner, stops cornering, and then jumps around really strangely. It's very strange. It's something very Automobilista 2. I haven't seen it in any other sims from, I don't know, R Factor 2 into iRacing for car simulators as this. So I'm not sure if they are correctly done or not. But as they drive, and this is a 331, as they drive, they tend to drive quite well, and they're quite fun cars, and I have never found high aero cars very fun to drive. So that's pretty good. The Bugatti circuit is one of those circuits that I keep saying that there should be more of this track scene in sim racing. It's not a popular track at all. For some reason, nobody really cares about it, but it has an excellent layout. And of course, it goes over, for me, one of the best corner combinations that exists, and that will be the corner combination and the start of Le Mans. I really enjoy the start of the straight line with that really fast right-hander and then the chicane. I think it's one of those very iconic combinations, and if you take the photos, you go over that arch, and you have beautiful photos taken there. And I think there should be more of this track. The Bugatti circuit inside, in terms of detail, is not really that detailed, but as for the layout, I like how the layout is. I've already talked about this corner combination. I like them very much. This could be a little bit better in terms of detail over here. It should tell us that you need to turn to the right. You need some cement blocks or some cones over there to tell us. Then we have all of these corners that tend to be a little bit harder on the brakes, but then release to a good straight line. And then we have a couple of corner sequences over there that are pretty good. Go on the inside, do a dive bomb as we do it on the internet. Here we go, getting back this car. Now we have a really interesting S section coming along. It's a little bit on the slower side. Kind of reminds me in some ways of Misano, because you can and you should go as much as you can over the Astro, even though you're gonna have the lap time invalidated. But it does remind me a little bit of Misano on that sense, that you need to maximize the amount of track off you're gonna get. And that's basically why I like it so much. I'm a really big enjoyer of Misano. Not a lot of people enjoy Misano. I really enjoy how Misano works, and the inside of Bugatti is, it's Le Mans plus Misano for me, which is, a big plus. Now, as for the GT3 cars themselves, the four cars drive extremely different. My favorite of the bunch is the Porsche. It's not going to be the McLaren. The McLaren's the one that I'm not going to say dislike the most. I think that probably is the BMW for other reasons we'll talk about. This one is extremely squirrely, even with more aero and softer rears. You go into a corner, and it's very easy if you don't trail brake correctly, or even if you are in the middle of the corner, you probably can see it. The car just wants to release from the rear, and I don't understand exactly why. But then again, I think it's part of the way that the physics work in Automobilista 2, because that is transversal to plenty of other cars, including the LMDHs that we were talking about. The rear tends to be extremely sensitive to whatever you're doing on the front or on the brakes. That becomes quite strange in some ways, and then the traction control is not as efficient as in other simulators that have this car, for example, Assetto Corsa Competizione, or in iRacing for other cars. The traction control tends to be a little more logical on this. So all the things together, including the way that Automobilista 2 does the physics, the cars tend to be on the GT3s, or other cars tend to be a little bit on the squirrelier side, but this one is the one that I think does it the most. The car that I prefer the most is the Porsche, because even though it's a Porsche, I know it's a Porsche, it exhibits kind of the same behavior, but it feels like the aero is more efficient, and it doesn't feel like it's going to kill you all the time. You can use that for your advantage. You know, a very light rear or a very nervous rear, you can use that to your advantage, while in the McLaren it's really not that much. The Mercedes is utterly unenjoyable for me, as it is the BMW. The BMW kind of reminds me of the Assetto Corsa Competizione 1 when it came out, but turned dialed to 11. You rely so much in the aids, and the car is so neutral that it is devoid of any particular type of charisma or driving characteristics. It's just so neutral that becomes boring as hell. Now, boring as hell, I think it's the way that describe generally the GT3 cars in Automobilista 2. I mean, they drive okay, I guess, even though they're far from my favorite GT3s. I think the GT3s in R Factor 2 or Assetto Corsa or iRacing drive much better. They're much more enjoyable to drive. But once again, I wouldn't buy this piece of content if you want to drive GT3s, or if you want to get it on Automobilista 2. If you want to get, GT3 racing, you should look in my opinion, you should look elsewhere. The updates, while I'm not sure who was asking for updates, maybe it was needed, but the updates don't really add much, in my opinion, to the package of the game. The package of the game for me is what Automobilista 2 does that is unique. The Brazilian cars, even these LMDHs, they're pretty good, but it's everything else but the GT3s. I think it's an interesting DLC package. The endurance spec isn't really necessary, as Automobilista already has GT3s, GTs, and some other prototypes, unless of course you want the authentic updated experience. But let us know below what you think.